this is a sort of dry run I'm going to be doing for a talk I'm going to be giving on Sunday about peasant weapons specifically. I sort of wrapped it all around a sort of guide to how to quell a peasant revolt, and it wound up running a little long. So unfortunately, well, I guess fortunately, you're seeing a preview, but unfortunately, it may be um, a little longer than it should be, especially with pauses like that. So just bear with me if you want to learn about the sickle. The Dussack is what I'm going to be talking about primarily, and I'm sort of going to be framing it around Paulus Hector Mayer and some of the Reformation wars that took place in Germany. So let's dive right in. Like I said earlier, sources are going to be Paulus Hector Mayer specifically, and his writings that he did. He bankrupted his family to write these guides to peasant weapons, as well as information that I sort of gleaned from the peasant wars that went on, the Reformation wars that went on Germany around the 16th century. We're going to talk about some politics, what caused your uprising, some tactics and logistics, what tactics were peasants using, what tactics should you as a sovereign use. And this is going to be sort of framed around you being a ruler and having to deal with some unruly peasants. Um, so, yeah. Then we're going to talk about some hand-to-hand tactics, and this is specifically because I feel that Mayer's work was reactionary. He was seeing a lot of his peers, his noble peers in armor, being brought low by the scum of the earth, effectively, by peasants, by the unwashed masses. It's really not an ideal way to die at the hands of some farming equipment, or perhaps just by the unwashed masses. I mean, if you're going to have to die, you always want it to be as romantic as possible. This was sort of when chivalry was a big deal. And, chivalry really started during the Hundred Years' War and became codified then. But it was still this idea of a Christian nation, of a Christian whole, was sort of what sparked these Reformation wars. And I believe, his teachings on how to fight with peasant weapons were entirely reactionary. Um, so it's specifically we're going to be looking at the German Peasants War of 1524 and 1525. Now these were the largest popular uprisings until the French Revolution. If you sort of bundle them all into one, there were sort of various pockets of resistance that was sparked by um, the Protestant Reformation, effectively, and sort of tearing down these columns of established hierarchy based on the Word of God, or the Word of the Catholic Church specifically. Like I said earlier, we're going to be looking at my buddy Paulus. He was an Augsburg civil servant. He actually bankrupted his household writing his guide over the course of 4 years. He was an avid collector of fencing manuscripts, and he was also a treasurer for the city of Augsburg. He helped fund the city. He helped pay for things, and he was not so much a civil servant as part of this scheme of um, pluralism and being able to buy your posts. So Mayer is part of the problem, very much, very specifically, and that's why I think he's an interesting figure during this time period, and somewhat interesting to frame these peasant weapons around. So what caused our specific uprising was the Protestant Reformation, and not because I'm not going to say that there's any righteousness in that, or say that there wasn't any. Right? Let's take a look at it as a political event that occurred. There was an obtuse, decentralized structure of power. There's pluralism where people had multiple jobs. There's multi-layered authority. You had the secular government and the Catholic government, right? The government of the Kingdom of God. There's actually a really good story about the city called Kempten, where over the course of centuries, the people who were responsible for the secular government became so intrinsically tied with the Catholic Church that when the secular rights of the city were bought out by a neighboring free city, all heck broke loose, and the Kempten is actually split right now between the Kempten Abbey and the city of Kempten. Um, and sort of what sparked all of this was the Holy Roman Empire trying to centralize that power, and it did so poorly. There was a middle class that they weren't even regarding as relevant, um, and this middle class felt threatened by some of these centralization techniques. So the taxes were unpopular, and as a result, this middle class became political. they became engaged, and unfortunately for the powers that be, that resulted in violence. You had citizens with trade skills, and they wanted to make a name for themselves. They wanted to become upwardly mobile, and this wasn't a thing yet. This until the plague and several wars made labor and trade a valuable commodity. This notion of someone raising themselves up wasn't really existent, unless you did it through sword, unless you did it through going someplace and conquering someone. Also, the conspicuous consumption, I think, is a great term to discuss the largesse of the nobility. I don't think it will be coined until the French Revolution, but it is worth noting that the upper echelon lived relatively lavish lifestyles, while the peasantry was being just taxed into submission. So let's look at some of the things you have going for you as a sovereign. You have strong leadership. You have some characters that we're going to be talking about that bring a lot to the table. Um, you need to understand that the two belligerents here are several bands of peasants and one group called the Swabian League that was specifically created to help fight against the Swiss and some neighbors to the east. But they became involved with dealing with peasants, and they commanded mostly cavalry. It was a group of landed nobles and their knights, and they had armor and they had horses, and that was pretty much all you needed to deal with the masses at the time. So you're going to have good discipline, and you're going to have the ability to use tactics. There's actually a gentleman named George Truchas von Waldburg, and I think he brings an interesting anecdote to this whole situation by how he dealt with peasantry. Because he had so much cavalry at his disposal, he had scouts. He was able to see where the peasants were coming from, where they were going. The In one instance, these peasants arrived at a city ready to take it, and he began negotiations. He, invited them in. They had a discussion, and while all this was happening, von Waldburg was actually sending his troops out to see what the peasants were up to. And when he realized that there was no one guarding the flanks or making sure there was any sort of defense, he sent out his cavalry. And during the course of the negotiations, the uh, peasant army was effectively routed because their leadership was still at the table and they didn't have any scouts. They didn't know what was going on. He would actually do this a couple of more times, each time with diminished success, right? The peasants were incapable of learning, but he would have eventually earned the name Baron Jorg, which means peasant scourge. There's also another gentleman named Gotz von Verlickingen. My German's bad, non-existent, but he actually fought against the peasants in a prior rebellion and found himself joining the side of the unwashed masses of the mob and commanding them. He oversaw several minor victories, but eventually was thrown out when a mob of peasants who had encountered him from the previous rebellion on the other side sort of bounced him out. He feared for his life and left, and that band of peasants was later routed because they lacked any sort of strong leadership. So leadership is key, and you have it as a sovereign. It's important to note that the peasants have some boons themselves. This is a revolutionary force. They are powered by zeal, whereas your soldiers are powered by duty. They are motivated by these things. The peasants will be using guerrilla tactics too. There are several cases of peasants coming out, shouting up a storm, and then just leaving and melting back into the forest, where your cavalry are not as effective. They aren't going to have any scouts though. And these are not military-minded individuals. These are farmers and traders. But on that end, they can make whatever they need. They bring their implements with them: pitchforks, flails, sickles, scythes, and then when they win, they will loot the battlefield for whatever good steel they can find or good iron they can find, and use that. So they're very versatile in all of this. Um, but one thing that they do have to deal with is army politics. They elect their leaders. They elect their leadership. Sorry, I'm setting it start with a stopwatch here, so I know how long I'm going. They like their leadership, and they also come to a consensus on how they make their decisions, and that's not necessarily a good thing. Napoleon once said that he would rather have one bad general than two good generals. Well, imagine having, a dozen generals of various skills all trying to agree on things. Like I said, with regards to von Verlichten, uh, he got bounced out, and he was a very capable leader. He had several wins. So this peasant army is going to be ephemeral, to say the least. Their leaders will rise, their leaders will fall, and their leaders will change. That means their tactics will change. One of their tactics that did not change excuse me, was the wagon forts, and wagon forts are so effective. They were continued to be used all the way up until Pioneer days, because what you do is you create a ring of wagons, and cavalry cannot get through it. Peasants would put any sort of confiscated guns in the center of these wagon forts, and force their opponents to engage them in hand-to-hand combat. Uh, this was probably what sparked Mayer to start writing these guides on how to deal with peasant weapons, because all of a sudden your horseback advantage, your advantage of mobility, is out the window when you have to face these peasants. When these peasants decide to stand and ensconce themselves in a given area. It is worth noting that if you have a capable leader who is able to engage the peasants in a spot where he or she would like to engage them, they can't use wagon forts. Wagon forts don't really work on hills, for example. The tactic of putting a gun in the center just doesn't fly. And at that point, if they don't have any ranged weaponry, you can just wait them out. Pure and simple. So let's talk about the meat and potatoes of this. Like, why are we here? We're going to talk about some peasant weapons and how to deal with them once you arrive at that wagon fort, once you've dehorsed yourself, and once you've decided to engage in hand-to-hand. Now, Mayer wrote all of these weapons down and how to use them to great effect, in my opinion. And I feel he did this out of fear. There's some people who say he did this out of a sort of out of largesse, out of really being entertained by how peasants would fight and whatnot. But I think he did this as sort of practical advice on how a peasant will fight and how to deal with them fighting that way. So we're going to encounter a couple. In his guides, he talks about some of these. I'm going to gloss over them because it's not really practical for me to show you. It's not practical for us to fight with as European martial arts enthusiasts. So I'm just going to skip over them and just do a brief summary. I mean, you have the flail. It's effectively a hammer that binds. Big two-hander, has a little swing thing on you, knock it over. It's really cool because there's a lot of overhead attacks that go with it. So it's very reminiscent of like a two-handed saber, but it will tangle someone's weapon up pretty well, and of course knock them right off a horse if you're able to land a shot. There's the Peasant Staff, and Mayer actually makes a distinction between a short staff and a peasant staff. Peasant staff is effectively a tree branch, or like a cudgel. Um, the gentleman in the right-hand corner in this photo, wielding a club that is very close to what a peasant staff would be, except the peasant staff would just be bigger and thicker. A lot of the mechanics around that revolve around getting your opponent on the ground and then doing a murder strike, usually to the back of the head or something along those lines. It is incredibly savage, and I think it sort of speaks poorly about the peasants that that he feels that it's just so brutal. There's no real sort of cunningness to this weapon. And then you have the scythe, which is effectively a poleaxe, two-handed though. It's good for short range and long range. The medium range stuff, I can't imagine it being very effective. When you see Mayer's drawings, they're either very far apart or very close. I would imagine it functions a lot like a poleaxe, except you can pull people in, not pull people in. Very interesting weapon, and I think that I would like to explore that weapon more someday. But right now, I don't think it's practical or safe to do so. So let's look at what we came here to discuss. Right, we came here to discuss a few things. Mostly the sickle, and this is a weapon I'm very excited about. It is very unique, and it's unique because several societies have used it as a weapon. Um, there are forms of Eastern martial arts that just purely rely on the sickle. Um, this weapon is ubiquitous. Every society, uh, since we've started planting things in the ground, has a form of a sickle, and it's very, you know, portable. I can put it on my belt. I can take it with me. It's easy to make. It's inexpensive, um, and I speculate that it's also very effective against armor once you get someone on the back. And as we're going to see, um, you will be engaging in a lot of grabs. You'll be engaging in a lot of trips. And I think it's going to be very easy to get someone on their back and then try to find the sweet spots or even pry if you need to get something off. Like it's very savage. Uh, I do like this sort of uh, Lichtenauer school of using your whole body, and your sword isn't just a weapon; it's every part of you. So here are my observations about the sickle. There's no guards in anything that Mayer teaches about. He does use terms like Zornha and Unterhau and whatnot. Um, but I really don't get the feeling that these are codified guards. It just seems very desperate. Um, it's not nearly as refined as Agrippa, which you have your prima, your terce, your secunda, your terce, your quart. Um, you're going to be getting ready to grapple in everything you do with this. Your pose is going to be more like a judo pose than it is going to be like a fencer pose. Uh, my boxing instructor always taught me to be half a man, to sort of give yourself a slender profile. And we do that in fencing as well, to a large degree. Not in this. You're going to square up, and the reason is because I can't be stabbed. And I need my abs ready in order to throw someone eventually. And since I can't be stabbed, I don't care how big of a shadow I cast. In fact, now that I mention it, if you are making yourself wider, you're just going to get hooked easier. There's no parry. There's no thrust. There's some deflection stuff, but there's mostly a lot of grabbing. My favorite part of this is that your main shots are going to be the head, neck, and groin. Um, he's very precise in the fact that you're going to hit someone in the head, the neck, or the bits, and that just goes to show how how there really were no rules in using this weapon. It's not a gentlemanly duel like you read about with rapier and whatnot later on. So let's look at some of the stances. I sort of gave these guards numbers because I am a big fan of Agrippa, and that's sort of how I learned. But we're going to have guard 1. We're going to put our right foot out, sickle on the left, and the left hand out, and we're going to be creating space with this left hand. Unlike other schools like rapier, where you hold your sword out, or backsword, where you hold it down and out, where you create that space with a point, your main threat is going to be your left hand. And the reason is because I can never get stabbed with the sickle. No one can ever stab me, so I don't have to worry about someone poking me or cutting something off. And if someone tries to get around, I can pull out pretty quickly. So your left hand is going to be partially one of the most deadliest weapons that you have. So we're going to bring it around here like this. Left hand out. And from here, we're going to be cutting to the right and stepping forward, aiming for the neck, head, neck, whatever. But you're going to want to either get a point in, or just as good, get the hook in, and then just keep pulling to displace. Guard 2 is one of my favorite because it's so unique, because you don't see this in any other system. You're going to have your hand up, right hand up, left hand out, and this is going to be protecting shots from below, because I'd rather have someone hit me in my offhand below than my good hand. I have my sickle here to sort of protect if someone tries to hit me up from above, but my left hand is below. Also, you can sort of mix it up like this and go from below. The left hand is under no matter what. If we're adopting the upper position, we're going to step to the right and cut left to the neck. If we're lower, we're going to step to the left and cut towards the abs. So again, stepping off the line here and trying to make big sweeping cuts. The abs are, in my opinion, especially vulnerable because you can get a good slice with this point against the abs. Guard 3, I think, is very indicative of how Mayer approaches things. We're going to see this later on, actually, when we talk about the Dussack. But you're going to put your left hand on your hip, your right arm and foot out, and be ready to use this. Now, we need to be ready to deflect with our left hand. This is a very reactive stance because I'm waiting for someone to do something, and then bam, I bring up the left hand. And remember, our stance is square. We're not like this. I know this photo or this painting sort of shows an exaggerated step. I don't think it's that exaggerated. I think this is more effective with the hand, with the body square and the hand on the hip for quick motion. Finally, our guard 4. There are 2 guards really. We're gonna put our left hand on our hip, straight up. I hit my fan. Straight up, and this is again drawing that opponent in. I could never get away with this in rapier ever or longsword because you will just stab me right to the gut. You know, I have this nice square target for you. I have nothing threatening. I would get stabbed, but because this is a short weapon and I cannot get stabbed again, I have less to worry about. From here, we're going to draw opponents to in, and then boom, cut to the head. This makes it hard for them to grab you, and again, it creates that sort of space because you know that I'm threatening you here. If someone adopts this pose, the counter to it is actually somewhat very counterintuitive. You're going to stand low with your right foot out. Again, your left hand is going to be on your hip, and you're going to be guarding any sort of sweeping attacks. I don't think that last part is that important, really, because we know where your opponent's coming from, and it's not going to be below. This counters this very effectively, because as soon as we come in and as soon as the person on the left fires, we're going to reach up with our left hand and stop them, and then cut to the legs. So these are our sort of 4 or 5 main guards. So let's look at some plays. One of these plays that we have is where we aim for the neck, and again we're using this left hand to sort of guide things. So you can really enter this. Oops. There you go. You can really use this play from wherever, right? It's very simple. We're just aiming for the neck and then keeping this left hand ready. If, when you make a cut, you are grabbed by someone's left hand, lift your right arm up and around your opponent's head, and then cut to groin. There's a lot of flourish here, and your hope is that you will get them to let go throughout this process. Again, while you're doing this, you're going to be using your left hand to be aware of their shot that's going to be coming in, because they're grabbing you with their left hand. Their right hand is still a threat. You're going to want to guard it there. So let's move on. Just checking my time. Oh, that's not bad. Cut number 2. Now this is a stance v stance cut. If you are like this and someone else is like that, if you are like this and someone else is like this, this is planned. You know, this is for someone mimicking the same stance as you. When if your opponent comes from above, again like this, grab their hand, lift up, and cut to the armpit. And the reason why we're doing this is because like this, because we're trying to keep our right hand out of reach of their left hand. And of course we can step off the line while we do this. The line being the space between the two of you. So we can step off the line and do this. This is one of my favorite. If I'm coming at you from above, I'm going to strike to your head. Always. If I'm coming up down, you're going to be getting a headshot. Usually with the tip. Boom. If not tip, that's the neck. Again, like we discussed, from here we're going to grab with our left, cut to the legs. So I'm here, I've been grabbed, someone's coming for my legs. The best thing to do from here is for me to not try to stop anything going on here, but attack the right elbow. And this is going to crumple, and I'm going to be able to finish my cut. So this is, again, another one of my favorites, where we're playing in this sort of three-dimensional grabbing game with a deadly weapon. But this is sort of second to what we can set up with our left hand. Keep your left foot out. Be ready to grab. I see I got a little belly area I got to address there. Um, Really important, if your left foot is out, your left arm is out, your sickle is pretty far away, relative. Um, so you just have to be ready to grab. When your opponent comes in, you want to catch their elbow because you have a lot of play here. Not as much play as if you were to grab their wrist, but again, remember, I'm still a threat if you have my wrist because I have so much range of motion with this. So you want my elbow, and you can really sort of prevent motion there. From here, you're going to pull them in, and you're going to trip. And then as they fall, you're going to bring this down and cut their neck. So from here, my plan is to have two people to help demonstrate this. It may just be one and me doing it, but we're going to play the robot game. This is a little game I learned from the local HEMA club out here, the Phoenix Society for Historical Swordsmanship. Basically, the goal is to complete the drill. We're not trying to win or lose. You only lose if you make an illegal move. If you get killed, you still win. If you kill someone, you win. But the only time you lose is when you do something in two tempo. Um, this is to teach us timing. What can I get away with in the same amount of time as you can execute a move? It's also to teach defense, which is one of my favorite parts of this. And a lot of beginning rapier. A lot of times you'll have people that'll just sort of dive on your sword, but in the process they'll kill you. I'm not very good at longsword. I have a problem with binds, which we'll discuss later. And I know that I am very threatening because I do not know how to defend myself. So, because I'm bad, I make others bad, unfortunately. So the robot game sort of tries to end this by keeping defense in mind. One of the reasons why we're going to be playing this is because safety, because I don't have a tip on these things. My models will be wearing mincer goggles, which just cover the eyes, because I want people to see how the back of the head plays in all of this, and also for the purposes of demonstration and explanation, because I want to be able to show people, okay, well, you know, my buddy Adam, he did this, but Connor, who's coming in down here, he's likely going to win because Adam is so far back, or so on and so forth. And again, we're doing a robot game because of safety as well. You can use this anytime you have someone new to any sort of martial art as a way to sort of get them to get in the fighting mentality without having them be dangerous to others. So here's how we're going to do this. Someone in the audience is going to give a guard, either 1, 2, 3, or 4. I think I got this backwards. I do. I got stupid fancy German writing. No, it's a 1 in the upper left-hand corner. All right, cool. Either 1, 2, 3, or 4, and the person will be able to decide if they want to do 4 or 4A. Then we're going to count it down. We're going to count down 1, 2, 3. While the audience is counting, both players in this drill are going to choose their move. So they're not reacting, they're choosing, and then after that they're going to make their move once it comes to 3. Again, no reacting. If you react, you cheat. If you cheat, you lose. So we'll play this for a while, depending on how long this goes. I'm sitting at about 20 minutes. And then we'll start talking about the Dussack, which is actually very popular in my Saturday fencing club for the HEMA guys. Mostly because it's a universal single-edge system. Joachim Meyer, who is a prolific fencing master, he sort of combines rapier, saber, messer, all into one system, one sort of universal system. And the Dussack can really be used as a proto single-edged weapon. I really believe that when Mayer included this, he included it in the scope of a peasant weapon. They're easy to make. We have 2 examples on the right there. One very nicely made, very professionally made. The other very simple. And you can even make one simpler than this. Instead of sort of fluting out that end there, you just bring the blade all the way down and then punch a hole in. It's that simple. You could probably even mold these incredibly well, um, and then just with the cast molds, and then sharpen them. They're cheap. They're easy to make. There are examples of metal ones, but there's also pictures of leather and wooden ones used in practice, I believe. But I could easily see these being sort of an improvised agricultural knife, an improvised farming implement brought to bear against the belligerent. Um, it's worth noting that later on I'm going to show you examples of a altercation between peasants and the powers that be, and a lot of the men have messers, which is on the right hand side. These weapons are super light and they're super quick. They're super brutal. So just be extra defensive when you find someone with a Dusek. I think that's what Mare's point was. Again, this is around the scope of how do we deal with peasants revolting. Um, and so just be sure to fight as defensively as possible, and beware what's called an aftercut, where I have been killed. It's a pretty bad wound, probably going to kill me and incapacitate me, but I do get one sort of last strike in, or you kill me as I'm striking and I'm able to follow through and mortally wound you either with a tip or a slice to a especially vulnerable area you left open because you were going for that killing shot. So here are my observations. Now, Dusek is actually incredibly popular in the HEMA community, so I'm sure there are people who know better than me. But when I was reading through Mare, I realized that Mare is still ready for the grab. A lot of his paintings show left hand on the side, ready to grab. In fencing, we talk about gaining the blade. There's none of that in this, but displacing the blade and displacing your shot is going to be key to my success, because I need to get your Dusek in a spot that is not going to threaten me before I can kill you. And it's worth noting that these Duseks are pretty short and stubby looking. Like if you imagine the Dusek on the right, that's a hand. We're talking about a blade about 4 hand lengths, maybe 5, maybe 6. So these weapons are incredibly short, so gaining the blade is just not going to be possible. There's not going to be a lot of tip jousting or tip wrestling. And then, so like I said earlier, I'm bad at binding, and then long sword, the bind is key. Um, but with Dusek, you can actually get into a pretty good bind, and Mare teaches a lot of these. So don't be, and he also teaches to not be afraid to enter, but then win that bind. Once you commit, you are committed. There's a lot of really beautiful sort of strike and riposte, strike and riposte, strike and riposte that goes on in Dusek. A lot of it coming from the abs. We'll have someone lean in for a shot, and then lean out, and then lean in for a shot. And Mayer talks about this briefly. He's got a few plates that sort of show this, but more plates are based around just jumping in there and killing a guy. So let's look at our key guards. Now, this is a little bit more refined because it's based off of a messer. So I chose to use the callouts he uses. His primary guards are different than what I've experienced. My buddy Adam knows a lot more about Meyer Dusek than I do, and he is a big advocate of a guard we'll see later on. But here we have Mayer showing off the Zornha, left foot out, right arm up, tip down, just ready to strike someone. Um, the post on the right, the photo on the right, is actually sort of a narrowed Einhorn, which is a transitory guard, usually, I believe. And I forgot the name of it, but it's not referenced anywhere else, and it just means above. I'm not a big fan of it, so I really didn't include it. But from this Zornha maneuver, we're going to cut to the left of the head. We're going to step out to the right. And then if that cut didn't land, if they blocked it, we're going to follow up with a stab. Because remember, these do have tips on them. I'd also like to point out real quick the hand on the hip, similar to Sickle. Mare is still ready for that grab. And that's going to become key later on. The Underhau, tip out, threatening side out, long edge out. So is your right leg, your right arm is up, hilt is in front of the head to help guard. And this is actually a hanging prime in other ones. And when I fight Dussack against the Hema kids, this is one of my favorites, is this guard right here. From here we can step to the left and then strike the head. And if that is blocked, we can pull back the strike and then hit their arm. The Zweigerhaw seems to be my buddy Adam's favorite. Again, he's a big Meyer fan. Right hand out, weapon on shoulder. You can either do this left or right if you'd like. But from here, we're going to step to the left and then strike to the right arm. And this is key because it's going to displace their shot. So this is a very aggressive move you can start out with to protect yourself. Because if you hit them in the right arm, they are not going to be able to strike back. Effectively, you're going to displace their shot while wounding them. If you have it on the right, just strike as if you're doing a Zorha. Cuts to the left of the head, step out with the right, and then follow up with stab if you need to. Also, I want to point out, the guy on the right has this very exaggerated downward stance. He's guarding his legs, and the Dussack, again, a very light and quick weapon, which means you're able to do a lot of change ups. Go for the head, go for the leg, go for the head, go for the leg, go for the abdomen. The leg is not something we usually want to go for when we fight people, because of how geometry works. If I have my head down trying to hit your leg, you have a really good shot against my head at a closer range. But I think it's worthwhile in Dussack. Again, there's people who are far better at Dussack who might be able to prove me wrong. This is very unique. This pose right here, the Absetzen. We have our right foot out, our weapon tucked in, and this is used to close and parry. From here, we're going to be waiting for one of their shots, because when it comes, we're going to set it aside and then kill them. Or we're going to grab their attacking arm and then kill them. But again, it's all this very tight stance here, ready for them to do something very reactionary. So there's a few reasons, going over the basic 101 stuff, that I feel this is a weapon for peasants. This is that picture I mentioned earlier on the right between the black and white, where we have the powers that be, uniform, looking good. People are running away from this angry mob. They have messers, but the people attacking them very ugly. Look at that guy with that hooked chin, hooked nose. He's got a messer as well, though. He's ready to go. Generally, Dussack was designed for how to deal with peasant weapons. And we actually see in this tome, plate 35 and 15, which is backwards, we have this sort of cron, or this Absetzen that's been fully realized. And later on, he has plates of mixed weapons, and the Dussack actually features quite heavily, relatively, in these. And you see examples of a Dussack versus a longsword and a Dussack versus a poleaxe using this cron and this Absetzen ready to go. Again, these weapons are easy to obtain, and this system can work for any single edge. The emphasis of deflection leads me to believe that you are using this to fight with someone who's sloppy, who's making big, exaggerated cuts. It's only later on, when he starts talking about binds and how to get and win them, that he, I believe, is sort of doing a cautionary, when you do your typical longsword stuff, here's what they're going to try to do. So again, I really think he was writing this in the perspective of how to deal with the peasants, given its proximity to other peasant weapons, and sort of the nature of how he wrote about it later on. So let's do a quick drill. Now this is a backsword drill that I read about, but again, the Dussack is a single-edged weapon that can be used universally. So we're going to cut from here to 1 to 4. Go 2 to 3. We're going to come up 3, come up 4, 5, 6, and we're going to finish up with a big boom from this this top cut that we saw in slide 1. So again, high, high, low, low, from here, boom, from here, boom, and then boom. And while we're doing these, we're going to take steps forward and backwards. And this is actually something I picked up from my friend Adam, who was reading Meyer, that this is a very mobile weapon. So you need to be able to learn to do these cuts while taking steps forward. He suggests, as we're shooting from here, as you're sort of reloading, you're bunching up, and then as you strike, you're stepping. And then you're bunching up and reloading, and you strike and stepping. So let's look at Dussack binds. Now again, I might not be the guy to be teaching this. I'm actually horrible with longsword binds. I'm a coward and will constantly leave the bind, which will mean I will get stabbed. But if we are deflecting from below, I'm going to use my hand to attack their hand. Boom. And then I'm going to take my left hand and guide the blade under their armpit. So again, as you're swinging into me, blocking my hand with your hand, Bronux effectively, and then guiding my hand in. This will hopefully disrupt whatever swing they're going to be coming in. And again, this isn't a sickle, it's a sword. So you need that full range of motion from your wrist to be able to do any long-term damage and not just cut me. If this happens to you, if boom, you come in and get hit, just step to your right and then hit them in the head. Because they're going to be trying to bring this into this armpit, and when you step to the right, you're going to be effectively removing yourself from their tip. So this motion will no longer be threatening. It'll simply go past you. Again, don't leave the bind when you take this step. Keep your hand here or grab their sword and then kill them. But whatever you do, do not leave that close proximity. I have bad instincts with this over my years with rapiering. Now, if someone's coming from above, if you are able to bind someone from above, rather, this is actually done from an Absetson that he then turns and he pushes down. So he goes like this to this. This previous one can be done in a cron. This would all make a lot more sense if I had a Dussack instead of a sickle, but you know, just imagine. So we have a cron here, and this is where this is sort of done with. Now again, we have slides, plates, of using this cron in number 6 in the lower right hand corner to block a longsword. So he has a lot of faith in this. Plate 22 could easily be an Absetson, or it could also be a cron that he's just sort of come down with. So just keep it in mind. So if you are able to deflect above, boom, you're going to guide your blade away from you, pushing theirs as well, and then you're just going to slide into the body with your left hand. So again, boom, boom, and I'm pushing away from me because I need to be cognizant of how light and quick this weapon is, and once I stab them, they can just turn around and kill me, and I don't want to die. This is a art of defense. If this happens to you, if you're coming up and someone does that, fold your sword in. Let them push down all they want. Fold your sword in, wrap around, hit them in the head. So yeah, boom, and all very doable with a very light weapon like the Dussack. If you are getting someone from the side, usually from an Absetson, we're probably not going to go for a cron down to the side. It's going to be an Absetson. You're always going to want to deflect away from you, and you're going to guide the blade into the neck while stepping off the line to maintain the bind. So I'm going to go from here, boom, I'm going to push in, slide in. If this happens to you, incidentally, you want to follow the person off the line. Give yourself some space, and then use the left hand to disrupt their strike into your neck. Use to grab it, and then boom. But you're going to be pretty tight and narrow in here, so you need to use your left hand to power them out. And that's really all I got. So we can play the robot game. Again, I got to set up a slide for the robot game for Dussack. But again, these are the savage weapons of people that are afraid of being taken out by unorthodox means, by being taken out by peasants and unwashed masses. You are likely in armor when you use this stuff, going against a wagon fort. You've ridden up, you've dealt with their battery of guns and crossbows and whatnot, and then now you must dehorse and engage these people. Spears are going to be able to reach across, but spears are going to be able to do so much. You might have to engage more directly. It's worth noting these weapons because there is a French author who wrote several of these guides to how to deal with peasant weapons, specifically because he, quote, encountered them upon campaign. So, these weapons are used, and there is a need for people to defend against these weapons, and Mare was there to teach this. So, please let me know how I did. Let me know your thoughts, constructive criticism, please. Go ahead and post them. I know I sort of glossed over the politics of everything um, in favor of the weapons. I think the weapons are more exciting. Um, if you have any questions about Mare or anything like that, let me know. I'm very interested in the man. But thank you for taking the time and watching.